Hey, welcome to episode 21 of Worth 1000 Words, and it is the first story of the new year. It's January 1st, still where I am, so I am barely getting this video out by the skin of my teeth. So, those of you on the East Coast or other time zones, I'm sorry, but it's tomorrow already. But anyway, I have a bit of a different kind of story, or at least I should say a different kind of setting this time, and that setting is war. But it is a little bit different, and I know I say that a lot. The things are going to be different. The things are a little bit different, but it is a smaller tale between only a few people. And you know that I am very much drawn to that kind of work. I don't have much interest in telling the tale of two warring parties because I think that with short stories, you need to have as few characters as possible. And so this one fit right in, and it's a very powerful image. And you will see that as soon as I show it to you very shortly. But before I move on, I need to talk about what I listened to while I wrote, because that's a big part of my writing process is finding the right music. And I went back to a composer that I really admire. I hadn't listened to in a long time, actually, and his name is Max Richter. I went to one of his more personal albums, and that album is called Songs from Before. And I know I needed to find something very melancholic and very sad, and I didn't want to go in the realm of fantasy or science fiction or anything too big. I looked at a few other war soundtracks, but they just had too much ebb and flow to them. They had too many highs, not enough lows. And I think that this artwork just needed a lot of lows. And I think you will see what I mean. Let's check out the artwork. Today's artwork is titled Wimagatee, and it is by a freelance concept artist and matte painter named Benjamin Nazon from Montpellier, France. Sorry about the pronunciation. I did my best. But anyway, this one really jumped out to me. It was another one of those in a sea of, while amazing art, just kind of more what you'd expect. And what's great about this image is it definitely tells a story. And I'm thinking the end of a story by the look of it. We have a soldier here who is crawled down this snowy hill, leaving a trail of blood. And the expression on his face looks like he knows what's coming. And what is coming are two figures off in the distance between a stand of trees holding torches. And presumably they are coming for him. And I haven't done a military story yet. I've done a lot of fantasy, I've done horror, I've done sci-fi. This is kind of a cool opportunity to do something different. And it's not the kind of war story you might think, at least what's portrayed here. It's not two armies clashing. There's literally three people in the frame. And I love the composition. We have our unfortunate hero in the foreground, and I think what helps is we have these two people in the background, and the trail just guiding your eye right up to them. You really know what's going to happen to this poor guy. Benjamin, I love this art. I look forward to checking out more of your work. And now I have to figure out what this story is about to me. Let's see what I came up with. Beneath the leaning tree, snow flurries hazing the world in crystalline glow, Private Don Jameson's blood kept him warm. It was a blanket that started at his chest and wrapped itself under his heels. He had left a trail of threads, he saw, down the hill that led out of the forest. He wasn't sure who was coming, but he knew someone was. His rifle was made of ice, inside and out. Still, it had some use. The firmness of it against his chest reminded him that he was alive. More than the blood that quietly flowed from him. He wished it were louder. Loud like the snowblower old Hicksley, his neighbor, used on weekend mornings to carve a path from his door to the road. Don Jameson saw the old man step through the trees, fighting with the machine like he always did. A crooked cigarette dangled from the corner of his mouth, accenting his curses with puffs of smoke. Beneath an eve spilling frost, the sky all pale and bright and clear, Donnie Jameson's gloves, jacket, and hat kept him warm. He peeked around the trash can to get a better look at the old man, but the fence between their houses was snarled with dead vines. so the old man looked like he was battling a nest of spiders, which would have been pretty cool. $1 says he doesn't get it going, Chris said from behind him, breath smelling of egg farts. Chris had bet $1 every time and lost every time, which had allowed Donnie to amass quite the comic collection. Before Donnie could answer, the snowblower roared and a white wave crashed over the fence, to which he and Chris dove under, hugging their plastic rifles with their backs to the oncoming soldiers. "Charge!" they yelled in unison. Beneath a sky of endless stars, on a well-trodden path to Pickman's Hill, Donald Jameson kept Bethany Wilson warm. She was tucked under his arm, scowling with shivers. "Let's go back," she said. "It's late, and my dad will kill me if I'm not back by 10. Donald kissed her forehead and pulled her tighter. "We're almost there." She mumbled a protest, but the wind picked up and whistled through the trees that had risen along the path, so he didn't hear. When her shivering didn't stop, he undid his jacket and gave it to her, laughing at her bundled form, which made her the proportions of his Aunt May, who was pushing 200 pounds. "What's so funny?" she asked, and that's when he saw how pretty she really was. Her porcelain face was rosy in all the right places, her brows arched inquisitively at his laughter, above those eyes that made his chest ache with happiness and sadness at the same time. He tugged her ahead until he crested the place he wanted to show her. He turned her around in front of him, hugging her from behind. He wanted to see her face when she saw it, but also wanted her to have a clear view. The valley opened up in front of them. A border of trees drew their eyes to a dark spot on the mountainside. It was only dark for a moment more. Perfect timing. When he felt her sharp inhale, he knew he had done right. The dark spot on the mountainside was no longer dark. Light bloomed from it, carried by the snowflakes neither could see until now, across the entire valley. "It looks like diamonds," she said. It did. 1,000 diamonds, maybe more, all their fractal detail reflecting and refracting something so simple as the light on a train to bejewel the world. "I love it," she said. Beneath a weeping willow, fireflies swarming over a sunset he couldn't place the color of, a baby boy of 12 months kept Don Jameson warm. "Should have named him Cole," Don said to Beth. "The little sucker is making me sweat." "Good thing," Beth said. "Summer's colder than usual this year." "When aren't you cold?" Don said with a chuckle. "I'll remember that when you try to sneak those cold feet of yours over to mine later tonight." Donnie Jr. cooed, pointing a fat finger at a cloud of fireflies that had dared to invade Tucker's territory. The border collie growled and snapped at them. They divided with each bite, forming into independent globes that Tucker couldn't keep up with. Defeated, Tucker plopped onto the grass and panted away his frustration. Then the fireflies flew farther over the field opposite their house, reforming into 2 tightly packed orbs. Their impressive light was only matched by 2 neighbor boys running down the street with Roman candles held high. Time slowed. The fireflies merged with the Roman candles' flames, and the sunset simplified into a singular color. That color was blue. Beneath a leaning tree, the blanket of blood now a blanket of snow, Private Don Jameson wasn't warm. A cold like this he'd never felt before. Not even the time Chris dared him to jump into the snowblower's wave in his underwear. Not even the time he'd fallen through the frozen lake, showing off his skateless ice skating moves to Beth. Not even the winter day his father had died, which delayed the burial far too long, and Don's dreams were plagued with the decomposing body of his father desperately digging his own grave with skeletal fingers, because he was tired of waiting too. No, Private Don Jameson couldn't compare this to anything. But amid the blue, there was gold. He wondered how the 2 boys with the Roman candles had made it this far. He wondered if Donnie Jr. would ever remember the fireflies that day. Wondering does you no good, his father used to say. Knowing is what counts. Private Don Jameson took his father's advice and stopped wondering. He looked around for diamonds or fireflies and waited for what he knew was coming. So immediately I am just trying to set the stage in a very basic description here. Kind of a run-on sentence, but you'll see that, or I guess you know since you've heard this story, that it plays a part of repetition through time, which I did not anticipate, but I really enjoyed where it went. And I think really what struck me most is I didn't so much want to tell the story of what got this guy here, but more like what he was thinking in this moment. Like what were the last things going through his head? Because we know that he's doomed, barring any kind of last minute miraculous rescue. But I don't think that was the intention of the artist, and I don't think that that's a very realistic depiction. And it, I think if I would have went that way, it would have definitely marred the, or I should say, diminished the artwork, at least to me. And so I'm just trying to, as I said, set the stage. I'm trying to get inside the head of the character a bit. But from the outside, it's things he already knows, right? So we have a blanket of blood that's keeping him warm. And we have this trail that we've established that he's left behind, leading to these two people up in the forest. And I take a few paragraphs here to just show what state he's in, his mental state, his physical state. And really what I'm doing here is trying to figure out where exactly I'm going. I don't know if I'm going to just prolong what he's dealing with right now in the present, or if I'm going to jump forward, which I jump back. And this one definitely took me quite a bit longer. I believe I almost did an hour and a half. And I think it was mostly because I did divide the story into, I guess, 4 chunks total, the present and then 3 moments in the past. And in essence, it was tough because, thinking of these unique situations in different periods of time, it's almost as if you're writing 3 or 4 different short stories. We're writing what you're seeing in the image now, and then also what he is remembering. And right here, when I was writing this, I wasn't thinking I was going to, I really thought this was going to be it. I wanted him to remember something fondly from his childhood that was reminiscent of the snow. The snow he's in kind of brought him back to this moment. I just thought of him and his friend playing out in the snow like soldiers because, he's a soldier here. And so that's a nice ironic callback, I guess, to his fantasies led him to his demise. But as you know, that changed quite a bit. The words came very slowly for this one, but I was overall happy with how it ended up. And you can see I was scrolling back up to try to repeat the cadence of the first line, because I think this is about the time that I imagined I was going to do more of them, because as you can see, I'm only a couple of hundred words in, and that's not even close to 1,000. And it was strange because even though I had all of these moments in this past, it was hard to flesh them out. And I feel like if there would have been one thing I would have done differently, maybe, I don't know, you tell me, since you've heard the story, but is that try to make each part equal. And I think that his time with his girlfriend was probably the longest, I believe. It's tough to plan those things out while you're just going from the seat of your pants. And right here, I'm ending the scene. I thought it would be a cool image to have this old guy just trying to get the snowblower to work, and he's pulling on the rope to try to start it. I mean, if that's how I'm from California, so I have no idea how snowblowers work, but I imagine they're like a gas lawnmower anyway. And I also kind of want to make this sort of a nondescript time. At first I imagined like this was a long time ago, because maybe where he is in this image is still in the past, our past anyway. I kind of kept it ambiguous, I think. At least I hoped. I wasn't too specific with anything. And here we are into the second time jump. Pickman's Hill, I don't know, that popped into my head from H.P. Lovecraft's Pickman's Model. There is no significance to that. It's just the word that popped into my head. And here I'm echoing the cadence again. So I think this is an example of how you can pull someone out of something, right? I think by now, if the reader has seen, hopefully they've recognized this repetition and they know there's somewhere else now, even independent of the description. And another thing I did to try to time jump is I called him Donnie when he was young, and Donald when he was a little bit older, and then finally Don when he was he went to adulthood. So I think those are interesting clues that you can pepper throughout. So you don't have to be overly specific with writing if you're trying to do flashbacks or flash forwards, because I think you might immediately go there because you don't want to confuse the reader. But I think that it's important to know that the reader is smarter than you think. Definitely respect their intelligence and do things like this where you can create little guideposts that are signaling you're doing something different without it bogging up the actual copy. And I knew that what I wanted to do here is kind of create imagery, right? So what do we have in this image, right? We have snow flurries, we have just snowflakes kind of, tumbling about, and we have these two men holding torches in the distance. Now, it's funny, now that I'm thinking about it, I mean, maybe they're there to rescue him, but I immediately went to they're the enemy trying to find him, which I think that's a little implied. But that's what I'm doing. With the first one, I have the snowblower kicking up the wave of snow. That's reminding Private Don Jameson here of his childhood. And then in this instance, what I do is there's just some spot on this hill that looks down into a valley. And when this train comes out of the tunnel, its light is so bright in the winter that it kind of highlights all the snowflakes and stuff. So I thought that would be kind of a cool image that would call back to the painting as you see it here. And that was really what I was trying to do. And every single time jump, I wanted to have a clue, right? Coming back to this here. And so like beneath this, so what I would do is establish he's under something usually, or actually all the time. When he's a kid, it's he's under the eave of a roof, and then in later on he's here he's beneath a starry sky, and then he's finally beneath another tree. And I think I would have preferred to use something that wasn't a tree later. Just it would be nice if they were all different, but that's just what came to mind when I thought of a summer evening. And that's another thing I did that was different. For the last one, I just had these images of these kids with these fireworks, these sparklers or Roman candles or something running down the street. And I like that image. And obviously that doesn't happen in the winter, although I could have made it happen in the winter and just, be an odd occurrence. But I don't know. I just pictured this summer moment, 4th of July or thereabouts, showing he's got a new baby. And the way I did bring back the temperature is I said that the baby was keeping Don warm. I use that as an element to clue the reader in to temperature. And that's definitely a common theme. You'll notice that their lights are a common theme because we have the torches, and the temperature is a common theme because I start out the story saying his blanket of blood is keeping him warm. So I know I need to sort of weave those in every single time jump, because I feel like that's how we remember things, right? We hear a piece of music, or we see a clip on TV, or we see a certain sunset or something, just triggers a memory. And so I imagine this poor guy sitting here beneath this tree, not much around him other than coldness, right? And a little bit of light. And these few elements are triggering his memory. And this is where I decide to put it in summertime. Change his name to Don now, Don Jameson. So that's another clue to the reader that we are evolving through time, because I don't know if you know anybody, but I know some people who, when they were younger, went by something like Bobby. And then when they grew up, they decided they were Robert. And so I thought that would be kind of a fun thing to do, just to help, once again, emphasize. And here I am talking about cold. So the baby's warm. Playful conversation between Don and Beth, who he has now married, or at least had a child with. And I named the boy Donnie Jr. And I didn't want to say Donnie Jr. in the first opening line, because I wanted everyone to have the image of a little baby boy in this guy's arms. And out of nowhere comes Tucker the border collie, snapping at the bugs. I'm sure if you have dogs, you'll know that they love to snap at flies and things, and that just popped into my head. But as you can see, I'm almost at an hour, and I'm only at 700, well, almost 800 words. Not quite the pace that I'm used to. Wasn't terrible, but it wasn't the best. Probably one of the worst times, I believe, but that's okay because I think the story came out all right. And now here I am in this paragraph. I'm bringing us. I have these fireflies flying over the field opposite their house, and they're reforming. They're reforming into two tightly packed orbs, which is reminiscent of the two people holding the torches here. So I think that's a good visual cue to bring the person back to the present of what we see right now. And as well as it's matched by the two neighboring boys running down the street with Roman candles held high. And if this wasn't, or if that wasn't enough clue, time slowed, the fireflies merged with the Roman candles. And here I am going back, just making sure that I want to bring it full circle. I want to end it where I began with a little bit of tweaking, saying, the blanket of blood is now a blanket of snow. He was not warm. So in all of these instances, he is warm, even though the opening scene isn't very pleasant, with his blood keeping him warm. Now, finally, we've clued the reader into this is the end of the tale. He's no longer warm. He is dying. And I use this paragraph as another opportunity to go back in time a couple times to have him once again sift through his memories very quickly. This is a cold that he's never felt before. Not even the time Chris dared him to jump into the snowblower's wave in his underwear. So once again, I go back there. And then not even the time he'd fallen through the frozen lake, showing off his skateless ice skating moves to Beth. And then I didn't go to his son for some reason. I went through to his dad, who I've established has died in the winter, which was another thought. And I think that this, now that I'm thinking back, I feel like this sentence, it works because it's not a mirror completely to the previous one, but what it's doing is it's bringing us to darker territory, right? It's kind of showing us the gravity of the situation he's in and how his dad's death plagued his dreams. And finally, wrapping up everything here, I don't know, this popped into my head. There's some kind of words of wisdom, right? Our parents, our grandparents, or somebody we know that is much older always tries to bestow words of wisdom, and I just came up with randomly, wondering does good, knowing is what counts. And so I decided to end it that way. And I'm a little bit over words, and so I got to go back and fix some things. And I think this is really what took most of my time. I felt like the writing was pretty sparse for the most part. There wasn't a lot of extra words, but I ended up going back down quite a bit and then kind of hovering around 1001 or 999 for a while and just picking my way through it, trying to minimize. So my first goal here is to get below 1,000, because I know right now that the way I ended it wasn't quite what I wanted. I wanted a little bit more breathing room in that last paragraph and the last line. And so I'm trying to get myself a little bit under 1,000 to make that room. I just want to elaborate a little bit more on wondering versus knowing. And here I'm just trying to make sure that I'm consistent with the naming convention, depending on where I am. So right there, I was kind of going back and forth, like, well, is he a boy then, or is he still a man? And I decided he was a man, because that was still sort of the bridge to his first memory. And I'm at 1,002, still in the first quarter or so of the story. So trying to pick my way under. Now I'm finally making some headway. I'm down to 984 words, so that I'm feeling pretty good about the extra. But you'll see once I get toward the end of it, I still have to fight it. Similar to the last episode where I was just waffling between one or two words, and it was more difficult than I was used to. I don't know why, but I feel like this story definitely packed a lot of information in only 1,000 words. And that was largely the challenge, is trying to balance those out and then hopefully create a satisfying end. And I love that last line, as it is now. Private Don Jameson didn't wonder, he knew it was coming. I feel like that's even more powerful than what I came up with, but now you can see I'm at 983. Just like I don't have nearly enough. And so you'll see that I go back and forth with this, extending it, deleting it, rewording it, all the things you do. And going back here, if I use dad as sort of like a closer pronoun, or keep it as his father, which I believe I go back to his father, because I think that's one thing that I always play around with is, when a character is referring to somebody, they generally will refer to them, even if you're in third person, at least I feel they should, how they would talk to them. So when I call it his father, that's a little bit more distant, right? Versus dad. And here I'm at 1001, and I just keep going back and forth with dad and his father, and you'll see that sort of bring this image back into your mind that you're seeing right here before you. So, he's putting out his rifle, leaning back to find any diamonds or fireflies, which I thought was a cool callback to that memory. And that's pretty much what I stay with. I just kind of clean this last bit up a bit. And there we are, 1000. Welcome to the end of the video, dear viewer. I'm so glad you made it this far, where I talk about my final thoughts and what I learned and maybe what you have learned from this, hopefully. This story at its heart is 4 different time periods, and that was the challenge here, is that once I discovered that I wanted to do that, it was how do I fit, and not only how do I fit these sections within 1,000 words, but what are they? And so, as I said in the narration previously, it was difficult for me because you have to create multiple threads here. And each one of those threads needs to call back and show some significance to the actual present day, which is this soldier under the tree bleeding out. And so I had to look at that image immediately and discover some imagery, right? Maybe what is on the other side of the camera, so to speak, that he's looking at that is bringing him back to these times. And I chose temperature and then the lights that you're seeing coming through the forest. Those are the 2 most powerful elements, I think, that you see in this. So I immediately knew that I wanted to have his life, so to speak, flashing between his eyes. Now, it wasn't his entire life, but it was these pivotal moments in his life that, for whatever reason, stuck out to him. Like the first one was just his childhood memory. The second one was maybe it was when he met his wife. And then the last one is when he had his child. And those, while maybe a little bit more cliche, I think those are the easy ones to go to. And maybe they're the most resonant. I don't know. And the words didn't come as smoothly as they usually do. But that is okay. I did take a little bit longer, but I think that the challenges just compounded that, right? So not only am I trying to figure out what this guy's story is, I have to figure out all of these elements that happen throughout his life that he's recalling and hopefully make them as believable as I can. Now, from a storycraft perspective, what I took out of this are the elements that help you clue the reader into a change, right? I think a lot of writers are guilty of, when they do flashbacks or flash forwards, they are either time stamping it literally with a chapter break or a scene break or something like that, or they are overly descriptive about where they are. And the solution I came to was to repeat the opening cadence, right? Not the specific words, but the rhythm that existed in that first paragraph, and then use those as a cue throughout to demonstrate the jumps. And if you've ever read Saul Stein's On Writing, you'll know that he has a great chapter on flashbacks, and he talks about how to just kind of blend into them and blend out of them without it being jarring, because that's the last thing we want, is to pull the reader away from the situation. We want to kind of just gently kind of ease them into this flashback or this flash forward to where it does still feel immediate. It doesn't feel like we're dumping a bunch of exposition. And that's what I tried to do here. I used these opening paragraphs as a guidepost to the reader to just cue them in on what I was trying to do. And then on top of that, another element I used was the man's name. So I started out when he's older as Don, as young Donnie, and then Donald when he's more, teen or early 20s, something like that. And so hopefully that was enough information to be not too obtrusive to the reader and help them understand what I was trying to do, and that there was a shift and we were jumping all over the place. And then finally, the imagery, it's prevalent throughout every time period. Hopefully it was different enough and interesting enough to help keep your attention and guide the reader anyway through this short 1,000 word experiment. So overall, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I can say this is a good start to hopefully what will be a good year. I won't go on rambling like I normally do. I hope you had a good new year. I hope you have some resolutions planned out. Mine is to write every day, and this is the first day of that. So far, I'm successful. We'll see how tomorrow goes. Thanks for watching. If you have any suggestions, if you have any piece of artwork you'd like me to write a story to, please paste it in the comments below. And I'm done. So keep reading and keep writing, and I will see you next week. Thanks again. Bye. If you'd like to read this story in its non-video format, check the link in the description. I didn't add anything else. Promise. Thanks again.